All right. Hi, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, so I am going to get started. Okay. All right. Please make sure you're muted if you've joined this recording. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Plan Unit I presentation. My name is Dory Dalton. I'm a community member here in Genesee for the past 10 years. I am a firefighter and your wildland specialist for the Genesee Fire Protection District. This evening, you will hear from Brian Mallett. He is our open space manager. You'll hear from Nancy Balter and Becky Smith. They are part of the Genesee Fire and Safety Committee. Chris Garlasco is also a part of the Genesee Fire and Safety Committee, and she will be moderating our meeting. Jason Puffett, the Genesee Fire Protection District Fire Chief, will be joining this presentation this evening as well. Please remember our presentation is recorded and will be posted for later viewing on the Genesee Fire Rescue and the Genesee Foundation websites. We've set aside an hour and a half. Please remain muted during the presentation. As questions come up for you, please feel free to put them into the chat box, and Chris will be monitoring the chat box for your questions, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. All right. So what is the CWPP? So our Community Wildfire Protection Plan was updated from the 2008 report. This was an 18-month project, and it was completed in April of 2020 in partnership with the Forest Stewards Guild. Our CWPP is a tool for Genesee Fire Rescue, land managers, residents, and homeowner associations to help us prioritize projects to make the district safer and more prepared for wildfire emergencies. This is a snapshot in time, and the project included data collected by driving all the roads and a general on-the-ground assessment of risk factors. During the presentation, we will be discussing these different numbers modeled. We modeled potential wildfire behavior under 60, 90th, and 97th percentile fire weather conditions that occur in our district, 40%, 10%, and 3% of the days between June and October, the period we most often associate with our fire season, and it was collected from 2009 to 2019. Our weather parameters came from the data collected at the Lookout Mountain Remote Automatic Weather Station, RAWS, and fuel moisture conditions from Fire Family Plus. We also want everyone to understand that a red flag day warning means fire weather conditions are present and include warm temperatures, very low humidity, and stronger winds, and are expected to combine to produce an increased risk of fire danger. The 97th percentile fire weather conditions modeled in the CWPP would qualify for a red flag warning day and are similar to conditions that occurred during the Elephant Butte fire in July of 2020 to the southwest of the Genesee Fire Protection District. Our district experienced 5 red flag warnings in 2019 and 16 red flag warnings in 2020. This season, we've had 3 red flag warning days in November and 4 in December. During this time, there have been multiple wildfires, including the most destructive wildfire in Colorado history, the Marshall Fire, less than 2 weeks ago. The conditions used for the 90th percentile fire weather scenarios would constitute a red flag warning day only if widespread thunderstorms were predicted for the area with a possibility of lightning strikes. Any conditions used for the 60th percentile weather scenarios have higher fuel moistures and lower wind speeds. As you look at the screen and you can see the graphic, this is your Plan Unit I. It's on the right, it's outlined in dark black ink, and it's a yellow color. And you can see the addresses that are included in this plan unit. Our plan units were created along HOA boundaries and property boundaries with consideration of roadways and topographical features. All right, so there are 3 ways that wildfire threatens our home. The first being radiant heat, and radiant heat is the energy that is transferred through the air to other objects when materials burn. If a house receives enough radiant heat for a sufficient time, it will ignite without flames contacting it. Sometimes radiant heat can break glass and windows, allowing windblown embers to enter the house. Even if the radiant exposure isn't large enough or long enough to result in an ignition, it can preheat surfaces, making them more vulnerable to ignition from exposure to flames and embers. Even vegetation and other fuels located away from the house can pose a threat. Ember showers are another way. Embers are the most common cause of home ignition. They are light enough to be blown through the air. It can result in the rapid spread of wildfire by spotting, in which embers are blown ahead of the main fire, starting other fires. And it is the main cause more than any other. And down on the bottom right is our direct flame contact. And that is when fire goes through the trees. It could be through the crown fire and actually touches your home, or along the ground directly and touches your home. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about your hazard rating for your plan unit. Remember, your plan unit is outlined in the dark black. Before we start, everyone needs to understand our entire district is 95% more likely to have a wildfire as compared to the rest of the United States. This puts our entire district at an extreme hazard rating. The ratings of the different plan units are relative to one another, and they're based on 4 variables. The first variable I'm going to talk to you about is fire risk, and it's right up here in the middle, okay? And fire risk is going to be based on fire behavior that includes the wind, the temperatures, and low humidity, the topography of the area, the location, and the fuel. And you can see in your plan unit that you are rated at a high risk. Another risk you have is suppression challenges. And suppression challenges, again, will be based on fire behavior. And challenges that could arise with getting equipment into the area. So that's why it's important to clear the roadside vegetation. An optimal driveway and roadside clearance is 13.5 feet high by 20 feet wide. And these are based on Jefferson County recommendations and GFR apparatus size. And this suppression challenges is rated at high. We move down to evacuation hazards, and it's in the bottom in the middle. So some of our evacuation hazards, again, it's going to be based on fire behavior, where you're located within our district, visibility of the fire during the fire, the width of the road, the type of the notification of evacuation. Is it the entire community evacuating, or is it just part? Are residents exiting while resources are entering? And there's two-way traffic. Do you live on or near a non-survivable road? And Brian will go into non-survivable roads more during his presentation. And you can see for evacuation hazards, you are rated at an extreme hazard rating. And the last risk I want to talk to you about is your home ignition zone hazard risk. The things we looked at for this would be, the roof of your home, siding, and the defensible space you've created on your property around your home. So defensible space is that 100-foot circle around your home, or 150 if you have a slope on your property. This is where we, the firefighters, have to have space around your house to make a stand to prevent fire from reaching your home. Think about your home. Would we, the firefighters, be able to defend your house without putting our lives at risk? We'd like to see fire on the ground in mitigated areas where we can have a chance to stop the fire, not allowing the fire to go from tree to tree because trees are too close and dense or have ladder fuels under them. We cannot fight fires in trees. And you can see that your overall risk for your home ignition zone hazards is moderate. When you combine all of those things, your overall hazard rating for your plan unit is high. So some more specific points or risks as to why these things were rated this way. Again, many of your homes are situated mid-slope and are ridge tops with dense vegetation close to the homes. There are some steep slopes below with dense forest. There's a ravine with dense forest on the western portion of Plan Unit I that poses a risk for active crown fire. Most private drives are narrow and they don't have turnarounds that are adequate for equipment. Approximately 20% of roads, private drives, and driveways have potentially non-survivable conditions. About 65% of the unit is at risk of passive crown fire activity. 40% of homes are at risk of extreme exposure to radiant heat. And these were modeled under the 90th percentile fire weather conditions. All right. As we look at this slide, I'm going to talk to you about flame length on the left, and this was modeled under 90th percentile fire weather conditions. Your plan unit is outlined in blue right here. You can see the majority of your plan unit is this peach color, which means flame lengths are predicted to be at under 4 feet, which is good because that means a hand line can hold that. But don't be fooled, there are some red and some darker pink, and that shows that there could be some areas with serious or significant control issues. And as we look on the right side of the graphic for crown fire, you can see the majority of your unit is covered with an orange or yellow color. This signifies passive crown fire. And the fire would be spreading due to surface fuels like bushes, grasses, and other small trees under the canopy. Please understand that your fire department will stay and fight the fire until the fire behavior makes it too unsafe to do so. All right, so on this slide, you can see on the left, this is a neighborhood out of Waldo Canyon, and the majority of the homes here were destroyed by ember showers. Okay, think of that blizzard, but not snow fire. Okay, you can see the trees around it, they're a little scorched, they're not burned down. Okay, and then on the right, you see a picture of a neighborhood in Superior that burned down a week and a half ago. And majority of these homes were destroyed by embers and radiant heat. This property is from the Cold Springs fire, and it survived. One of the things that this property did is it participated in a home assessment program that's offered in Boulder. They focused on zone 2 of their home out 5 to 30 feet. They broke up the continuity of fuel so that the fire could not reach their home. They had proper healthy tree spacing. So it is possible. So please know there are steps we as homeowners can take to help lower our risk, and in many cases, our neighbors' risks as well. One of the recommendations that we make is spacing between your trees. These are all based on Colorado State Forestry Service guidelines, and they were updated in April of 2021. And it's recommended that you have crown spacing between your trees of at least 10 feet. And that means from the outer edge of the tree to the other tree, not at the top, okay? And if you have trees on slopes, then you need to space your trees more. On limbing, the recommendation is to limb 6 to 10 feet from the ground or 1/3 of the total height of the tree, whichever is less. And that means the most outer part of your tree, not at the trunk. So a 6-foot person should be able to walk underneath your tree without their head hitting the underneath of the tree, okay? Another recommendation is to remove the ladder fuels from beneath your trees. Right here, this is what we see quite often in the neighborhood. What we want to see is we want to see it clear underneath the trees. We want the trees trimmed up, and we don't want anything underneath them so that fire can't catch your trees on fire. And then last but not least is mowing your grass in zone 2 to 4 inches, right? We want to break up the continuity of the fuels, and we want to keep that area lean, mean, and green. All right, so this slide is going to talk about some of your home exposure risks, and these are due to your overlapping ignition zones, your potential to exposure to short and long range spotting of embers, and potential exposure to radiant heat. The top graphic right here is based on 90th percentile weather. Again, you're outlined in blue. And you can see right here, 1/3 of your plan unit is at extreme risk. When we modeled it at the 97th percentile fire weather conditions, it jumps to 2/3 of your plan unit are at risk. All right, so some of the other things that you can do is home hardening in defensible space, right? There was an article in the Genesene last month talking about starting with your 0 to 5 space, right? It's a perimeter around your home with no vegetation. Remove the pine needles from your roof and gutters. And this has turned into be something that we have to do 2 and sometimes 3 times a year. Remove flammable materials from beneath your deck, right? Remember, things that catch on fire are 2.5 to 3 times the height of what's underneath there. It's going to catch your joists and your supports and lead directly to your home. 80 to 90% of our homes do ignite due to embers rather than radiant heat. And if you ever choose to replace any exterior materials, please think about fire-resistant exterior materials. All right, so what we normally do is take pictures around the neighborhood to show you some examples. And these are all examples from Montaigne Drive East. So this is a house, this is one house, and we've graded out to keep it anonymous. And this is a tree growing at the front of the home. It's a big tree. This tree needs limbed. You can see here, there are tall grasses that would just be a ladder fill to the tree. So the grass needs to go and the tree needs to be limbed. In the middle picture, you can see tall grass growing under a tree. The tree definitely needs to be limbed 6 to 10 feet. And behind the tree, it appears to be that there's a lot of little seedlings. The seedlings need to be removed or drastically thinned. There's not enough space for all those trees to grow healthy. On the far right, you see this is the gray area is one house, and over on this far right, this is a juniper bush that is in the 0 to 5 space. Junipers are highly flammable, and we don't recommend having them on your property, period, because they're just so flammable. And mow the grass and take out the seedling trees. All right, this slide shows 3 different houses with, these are decks, things underneath decks. On the far left, you can see this homeowner has stored their firewood underneath their deck, and firewood piles can easily ignite from embers or surface fires. They can emit a significant amount of heat and or have direct flame contact that could ignite your home. Firewood piles, it's recommended to be moved 30 feet from all structures, and we should ensure there's at least 10 feet of clearance between the piles and all trees. And then the picture on the middle and on the right, the point of this is there's a lot of things stored underneath there, and there's tall grass. And again, if you have that direct flame coming up through the surface, it's going to reach your deck and the things that are flammable underneath. It's going to light your supports and your joists on fire. And again, lead right to your home. Okay, so this slide shows on the far left, this is a fence, and it's kind of one of those screen fences or dog run fences. And why that's important is, remember, it's connected directly to this home. So you need to create a 0 to 5 space around that fence so that direct flame contact cannot come up and reach the fence. Again, it would be like a wick directly to your home. The picture in the middle, this shows a garage door with it's got a gap at the bottom. Again, one of the things we look for on the garage doors, there should not be any gaps all the way around it. We don't want embers to be able to get in if they were blowing in the air and ignite the things inside of your garage. On the far right, so one of the positive things is I believe this person has gutter guards, but unfortunately there's needles lying on top of the gutter guards. So again, I know we get those to keep the gutters clean. So get out that blower and blow them off. And again, it's going to have to be probably more than one time a year. Okay. All right. On the far left, this is a structure that was attached to a deck. And this person is storing firewood inside. It looks like a great place to store firewood. The only problem is there's not a door there to keep embers out. So the structure needs a door that's sealed so that embers cannot get into the structure. And then again, you would need to create a 0 to 5 around that structure. It looks like on the far left side, kind of behind it, there's some cement, but there needs to be, again, 0 to 5 all the way around it so flame cannot come up and touch it. The picture in the middle, that is a hillside of very flammable junipers. And then on the far right, this was an interesting picture. This dark picture right here, this is a down and dead picture of a tree. And then you can see in the background, the house. I can't really determine how far away the house is, but if you have a down and dead tree in your yard, and Brian can probably speak a little more to this better than I can, so Brian, please feel free if you need to. It is okay to have one of these on your property. It's good for erosion, it's good for the wildlife, but if it's in your home ignition zone, that might be a reason to remove it. If there's a lot of things around it, you may need to mitigate around it. And I definitely don't think most of our properties are large enough to have more than one of these. And there are rules, Colorado State Forestry rules about how to have these in your yard and things like that. So Okay. The far left, this is a house that's been shaded. You can see the tree. The tree is very near the home. All tree branches need to be at least 10 feet away from the roof or the side of our homes. There's tall grass under those trees. The continuity of the fuel of those trees, you know, it looks like a lot. The middle picture, there's the timbers you can see. A lot of us have those timbers. It's expensive to remove them. The best option is to remove them, but if you can't, again, you need to create a space around them, a 0 to 5 space around them, so that a direct flame contact cannot reach them from the ground and then lead to your home. And on the far right, in the very far background, that is a house back there. I don't see any defensible space at this house. There's a lot of seedling trees, young trees, grasses underneath them. All of these trees need limbed and probably thinned just for the health of the tree. So, yeah. All right. So I am the person you call or you email for a home assessment. I will come and I will give you a detailed assessment of your home ignition zone and the defensible space around your home. And this is available to anyone in our fire district. When you go through this process, I create a report with mitigation recommendations and photographs. I can't make you implement any of the recommendations. They're just recommendations. And again, those are all based on Colorado State Forestry Service guidelines as well. You own the data and the report. I don't share it with anyone. I'm not affiliated with any insurance companies. So your report is stored in a server offsite. It's not subject to any Freedom of Information requests. Wildfire Prepared is a certified or a certificated program. So what that means is if you choose to go through and complete all the recommendations and have me come back out and I agree with you, you receive a certificate of mitigation that is good for 3 years. And what else is it good for? Well, you can show it to your insurance company and show them that you're making an effort to mitigate your property. And it's also an excellent selling point for your home, should you happen to do that. We get phone calls here about things being mitigated. If you're interested in this, please feel free to contact me. My email address is on the screen and I will put it in the chat box at the end of this presentation. The cost of my assessment is $100. All right, and that's the end of my presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Thanks, Dory.
Yeah.
So my name is Brian Mallett. I'm the Open Space Manager for Genesee Foundation. I was looking through the list of folks here, and I think I've met a lot of you personally out on your property or just met you through other meetings. And for those that I have not met, feel free to give me a call after this tomorrow or shoot me an email tonight if you have any questions that might be outstanding about open space or wildfire or anything that deals with that. So the first thing I want to let everyone know is that we have an annual open space management plan that goes into more than just forestry. Forestry is a big part of it, but it also talks about how we manage weeds and trails and erosion on open space. And I have one for 2022. It was approved by the board of directors and I will be presenting it to the community on January 20th. And so in there you can find a lot of our planned forest work for the next year, in fact, the next 2 and 3 years that we have planned. A lot of that is grant funded forest restoration work, but the grant funding does not include roadside thinning, which is something I'll talk about later down here. You go to the next one, Dory. Dory, can you? Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. So this is just a different map, but you can see the red outline is Plan Unit I. And some of this in here, I wanted to highlight that we had done forest restoration work, some thinning out on open space. You can see those different colored polygons out there. And so we completed that in 2021. Those were grant funded acres. And the light green one you can see is the closest one that I would call roadside thinning. I think there might even be some folks that live over there on this Zoom. So on the left, you can see some of the plans that we have for the next couple of years. Last year and the year before, we were working out there. Towards the end of this year, we were working over on Chokecherry, off of Chokecherry, on a open space parcel that has never been treated. It's particularly steep. And the reason why we're working there is because it was called out in the CWPP as one of the highest risk areas. It was just below the ski hill road, which is the highest risk area in the fire protection district. And then in 2022 and 2023, plan to complete that and then work on the western border of Genesee, which I know I don't have a map of that there, but it's over by Holly Court and Foothills Drive. Thanks. And hoping to partner with our large landowning neighbor to the west. That's up in the air right now, but either way, we will be working over there under grant funded, with grant funds. And then continuing through to 2025, the center of Genesee, Ryan Streamside and Miners Mile would be the next priority. All of these priorities, all of these units are based on priorities from the CWPP and discussing it with Jason and Dory and Ryan at the Fire Protection District and the Fire and Safety Committee. You can head to the next one, Dory. Thanks. So this is kind of the meat of my presentation, mitigating roadways and open space. A priority for the Genesee Foundation starting last year, and there was a lot of plans laid, is mitigating our major roadways where open space meets private drives and county roads. And when Dory and I talk to folks, when we do neighborhood walkthroughs, we talk to folks about including roadway mitigation as part of their defensible space when their property abuts a road. And the property owner is responsible for mitigating their own defensible space, and they can remove trees on the open space. That might be a question that some folks in the community ask about that, especially when it's including the ARC. But you are allowed to remove trees on open space, just provided you talk to me about it, fill out a form, and go through the ARC process. And the ARC really wants to be more involved and is more involved in encouraging efforts to mitigate private property in Genesee. It's a big priority for them. And so contrary to what happened in the past, the ARC is very supportive of removing trees and encouraging landscape that is less likely to burn. You can forward to the next one, Dory. So I just wanted to say that everything Dory talked about and everything that I do on the ground is based on best available science and from the Colorado State Forest Service. And the science actually hasn't changed all that much for the past 20 years. That is to say, wildfire and defensible space science. And Dory mentioned that the 2021 home ignition guide from the Colorado Forest Service, it was just released and it has up-to-date science, and a lot of that is based on what we're seeing out in California, the West in general, especially in Colorado. And that's why Dory harped on the 0 to 5 zone, which is zone 1. It's one of the most important things you can do as a homeowner. And then when I talk about fire, I always say hope for the best, which is Elephant Butte fire, which is like a distant memory now. That was over in Evergreen. I live in Evergreen. I can still see the scar of the Elephant Butte fire. That was a 50-acre burn. They still haven't released what the cause was, but it didn't burn any homes. There was a pretty large evacuation. There's a lot of people in Evergreen, but no structures were lost, no lives were lost. And I have to update this, but plan for the worst. That would be the Marshall fire, I think. Cameron Peak fire, as far as acreage, yeah, but no homes were actually lost, or not nearly as many in the Marshall fire. I think as far as the Cameron Peak fire, it was maybe some accessory dwellings is what was lost. But the Marshall fire, as you all know, was definitely the most devastating. So planning for the worst. And then this last point is something that I hear folks say to me is, if it's going to burn, why should I do anything? And my first and foremost response to that is because your fire department might try to come down your road and might try to come up your private drive or your driveway to save your house. And you should do everything in your power to make that space defensible and safer for your fire protection district. That's really the first and only thing you should think about. When if somebody asks me that, that's my response to them. And then secondly, you can actually save your house. It's proven. Dory showed pictures, and the reality is, if there's 110-mile-an-hour wind gusts, maybe not. That's what we saw in the Marshall Fire. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's a 30-mile-an-hour gust and it's a grass fire, and fire department can put it out. And it's not a canopy, it's not a crown fire. But if you have none of those things that Dory talked about as far as home hardening and defensible space, the chance that your home burns goes up, even in some of those direct attack fires that can be controlled. And then the third reason why you should do anything is for your neighbors. If you live at the front of a private drive and there's 3 people that live behind you and they have to go past your house and past your yard and past all those saplings that are right along the road that belong to you, those could be on fire, and that could prevent them from getting out or make their evacuation a bit more hairy than it has to be. So for those reasons, that's what I tell folks. And I hear that surprising amount. But those are things that you can take as well and talk to. There's probably folks in your neighborhood or that you've talked to that have that response, and those are things that you can tell them. You can go to the next one, Dory. So these are photos from California. I'm sure there are more now from the Marshall Fire, but I just I like to point out that there are worst case scenarios, and those have happened, like the Paradise Fire. There were 10,000 homes that were lost in the Paradise Fire, to put that in perspective. But that bottom left one is a resident that had to drive through fire to get out, and there were countless stories of that in the Paradise Fire. Haven't heard any of that happening in the Marshall Fire, but I've seen some YouTube videos that aren't as graphic as these from California, but there's probably some stories that happen like that in the Marshall Fire. So that's the worst case scenario: driving through fire, getting stuck in a fire, something like that has happened. That's what we're trying to avoid. You can go to the next one, Dory. So non-survivable roadways, that's something in our CWPP that was pointed out. And the way they gathered that was if there are flame lengths that are greater than 8 feet. And it doesn't take a lot to get 8-foot flame lengths. And we have our fire chief on the call, and I wonder if at the end he might talk about that. But the CWPP, it's a model. They model this stuff. They don't actually go in light flames and figure that out and measure it. It's all algorithms, and it's the worst case scenario weather scenario as well, the 97th percentile weather scenario. And so you can see it's most of the private drives. What do they have in common? There's trees hanging over the roadways. In these worst case scenarios, there could be, and likely would be, greater than 8-foot flame lengths that would prevent a efficient and safe evacuation. You can go to the next one, Dory. And this just, I put that description in, but I already say it. 8-foot flame lengths is the big thing. And the way they say it is drivers stopped or trapped on these roadways would have a low chance of surviving radiant heat, which is just the heat coming off the fires of this intensity. You can go to the next one. So here's some photos of private drives. Just some things I like to point out. So I've been talking a lot about non-survivable roadways and roadside thinning and mitigation. The bare minimum I recommend for our private drives is having a 15-foot box of no flammable vegetation. And to give you a reference, that tree on the right, the lowest, the highest part of the lowest branch there is about 15 foot tall, and our private drives are on average 14 feet. To put that in perspective, the county road like Montaigne is about 24 to 26 feet wide. So that tree on the right was actually pruned, limbed up, did a great job, whoever that was. That possibly open space. I could have just complimented me, but I don't think so. I think that's on private property. On the left side is open space, and that's an example of something that I can do with my crew. And we actually did go through here in 2020 and remove some of the trees and limbed up. And this picture, I now remember, I wanted to add a different picture from a different perspective. It doesn't look like it, but we removed about half of the trees in there. And they are spaced out at least 10 feet or more along this private drive. And probably could have pruned some up a little bit more. But I just wanted to, trying to remember exactly what private drive this was. But anyhow, that's an example of open space on the left and private property on the right. And I remember now the homeowner did do some things on that side as well. So it was a bit of collaboration, which was good. Okay, you can go to the next one, Dory. And here's one that is all private property. One thing I wanted to point out, I happened to take this, after our recent snow and the road was a little icy. The less trees you have, the more sun, and the shorter amount of time your road will be snowy and icy. So that's one positive for having less trees. And then also just generally less needles in your yard that you have to pick up. And so this roadway, again, it's hard to assume, to look at things from one perspective. Because I know actually that one of the homeowners on this drive did do some mitigation, and she in fact did remove some trees along her private drive. But one thing you all know is that we have a lot of trees in Genesee. And even when I do a forestry project, I look at it and think, man, I wish I had cut more trees. And that's why the recommendations from the Colorado State Forest Service, and when Dory comes out and does a home inspection, it sounds like a lot of trees, but after the fact, and when you think about things like the Marshall Fire or even the Elephant Butte Fire, you'll think, I still have a lot of trees and I could still remove some more. That's often the conversation I have with folks. You can go to the next one, Dory. Another private drive, and what I wanted to point out here on the right is there's a slope coming uphill, and this is a scenario where you could easily get 8 foot, greater than 8 foot flame length. So this is one of those private drives that the CWPP model pointed out as a non-survivable roadway because it has greater than the potential for greater than or equal to 8 foot flame lengths. And what does that look like? It's trees going all the way down to the ground, and a slope coming up and over the road. So if you imagine a fire on the right side there, it would easily overtake the road. It of course is always scenario dependent, but this is the kind of scenario that the CWPP points out. And so what is an example of good roadside mitigation? Removing a lot of those trees, trimming up a lot of those trees. And it's not always that one big tree that's hanging over that road, but it's a lot of the trees that are connecting it to the rest of the forest, and the ladder fuels, which Dory talked a lot about. Okay, Dory, you can go to the next one. Is this you, Nancy?
It is.
Great.
My name is Nancy Balter. I'm on the Fire and Safety Committee, and I'm going to talk mostly about emergency preparedness. One thing you see your plan unit outlined here, and this is an estimate if the entire district was evacuated at one time, how long it would take you to get up and over and out to I-70. And it is a long time. The main streets are going to be very congested. You may be at a standstill some of the time waiting for traffic to move. And if you happen to be at a standstill in a non-survivable segment of roadway, and there is an active wildfire here, you could die in your car. And that is a life safety concern that has everybody paying attention. What can we do to help this situation? The first thing you can do, if you compare on the figure on the left and the figure on the right, one says everybody's taking one car. The other one says everybody's taking two cars. Please, if you evacuate, you may want to put additional things in a second car. Don't do it. It will affect everybody's time to evacuate. As I said, it is sobering, and both the fire district and the foundation are paying attention to this and seeing what we can do. Next slide, please. So we have this outlines a lot of the things that we have already said. The roadway congestion and long evacuation times. Almost 8 miles of Genesee roads would experience, 7.8 miles of Genesee roads would experience extreme congestion if everybody evacuated at once. Now, when the CWPP modeling was done, we said, but aren't you assuming worst case, that everybody in the district is home, the entire district evacuates at once, everybody takes two cars? And the answer was no, not at all, because we haven't even considered the effects of poor visibility due to smoke, people being very emotional and frightened and what that does to driving, and all of those kinds of variables. So if there is an evacuation, it's just not as simple as getting into your car and driving out. The other issue that we have in Genesee is that everybody has to evacuate to the north and get on I-70. And there could be a wildfire scenario of a fire starting in the north part of Genesee, either from something coming from the highway or a cigarette thrown on the ground at town center and winds going in a direction that pushes the fire across Genesee on the north side. What do we do then? We have no way of getting out. So again, these are things that are getting very serious attention. Next slide. Even private driveways can be problematic. And these are the guidelines. And again, this is in that Colorado State Forest Service brochure that you should have gotten in your mailbox along with the invitation to attend this Zoom meeting. In addition to not having trees going over your driveway, you don't want to have ladder fuels. Basically, what you need to be able to do is get out of your driveway if the fire is right there. So these are things you do in order to help ensure that. The other thing is, please, you need signs at the end of your driveway with house numbers that are reflective. The fire department is working right now on facilitating that. We had this big push in Genesee, if you've lived here 10 years or more, to get the signs on reflective, using reflective numbers. And the maintenance people very nicely put them on wood posts, which are combustible. So, you could say that if there's a fire here and that burns and your house burns, who cares? Nobody's going to come there anyway. But, they do need to report houses that have been lost. And without those, it's a problem. And it is also, if you have a house fire, if you have a medical emergency, I can't tell you, and you probably have had similar experiences, trying to find an address in Genesee, and you don't know which house it is. So you need to take care of your driveway. Next slide is an example of a driveway in the plan unit where the trees, there are a lot of trees on both sides, and they kind of come over and touch, and that can be a problem. Next slide. The Marshall Fire should alert us all that we need to be prepared, that you may have no warning. And so many people who evacuated at the Marshall Fire, who didn't have much warning and took whatever they thought about, didn't have things they needed. And if they lost their house, they sure wished that they had been prepared for it. Now, the Marshall Fire, that was not in what is generally considered the wildland urban interface. They are not being pounded like you guys are all the time for what you need to do. So let me pound you once again. Be sure you register for Code Red. That is the reverse 911 system that Jeffco uses. Your landline is automatically registered. If you have your landline through a voice over internet protocol, it may or may not be registered. Your cell phones are not registered. You should register every device that with phone numbers and also emails that you want to get the Code Red message. If you have a caregiver at home for kids or elderly, they should get the Code Red notice as well. Have a family emergency plan. Talk to everybody who lives at home about what are you going to do if you have to evacuate? Where are you going to go? Is there a default place where you and all your family members will meet? Identify a relative, a friend who doesn't live up here, that if you can't reach each other for whatever reason, everybody's going to communicate through this person. Talk to your neighbors. Talk about the safety concerns that everybody has and what you can do before an emergency to develop contingency plans. If you're not home, but you have children at home, is somebody going to look out for those kids? If you're being evacuated, you likely will not be able to get back into the community to get a child or a pet or somebody who can't evacuate on their own. So this is the kind of thing where you want neighbors to have a plan to cooperate with one another and cover one another when they can, especially on red flag days. Be ready to evacuate within 10 minutes of receiving an evacuation notice. So what does this mean? Next slide. Have a go bag. Have something packed that will support you for the next couple of days. Clothes. Order some extra medication and have that extra medication in that bag. If you can get an extra cell phone charger, put that in the bag, because that's one of the commonly missing things that people find. And then have equipment. If you should get stuck somewhere, have a flashlight, have a whistle. So if somebody needs to find you, you can blow the whistle. This comes from one of the Rotary Wildfire Ready from Evergreen brochures. You can download them from the Rotary wildfireready.com website. There are links to them on the Genesee Fire and Safety portion of the Genesee Foundation website, and there are also hard copies. And right as you walk into Vista, straight ahead, there's a table, and these are also on there. And I recommend that you get them. They'll give you ideas for the kinds of things that you should have in your go bag, and then on top of your go bag, the list of last minute things that you want to throw in if you have time. Believe me, if you've got an evacuation notice, you're not thinking with a clear head. So you need to pre-think about these things. The next slide, please. So this talks about what you should wear when you evacuate, and you don't want anything that's a synthetic material. It will melt under extreme heat. So you want cotton materials. And it may be hot, but cover your body as best you can with the cotton materials. Sturdy boots, gloves, a bandana. Now we all have masks, so one of those. Something on your head, again, not of a synthetic material. And those can all be right where your go bag is, so you can just change into them quickly and get going. This again is a Rotary Wildfire Ready brochure, and it also says you may get a pre-evacuation notice. And it says if you have time, the things you can do outside your home and inside your home to prepare your house to better survive. Next slide. Becky.
Hello, everyone. I'm Becky Smith. I'm your neighbor in Genesee and also a member of the Fire and Safety Committee. The reason we're giving these presentations is to make you aware of the findings of the CWPP for your specific area of Genesee, some of the specific risks that you guys are exposed to. And you know, if you're like the rest of the neighborhood, it's sobering. It's a lot. And a lot of people are overwhelmed after they sit through this presentation. But hopefully you're also picking up on all the things you can do. You can make a difference. And it doesn't have to be done in the next 3 weeks. You know, you just take baby steps, do a little bit, do something. And one of the things you can do besides sitting through this presentation is scheduling a neighborhood walkthrough. And that's an opportunity for Brian and Dory to come out to your street, to meet you guys face to face, and to talk in more detail about the risks that you have on your street. You know, the CWPP was modeled, and some of the situations that they saw when they wrote it up have changed even since then. So you can talk about that tree or that house or the space between the houses. You know, what's Genesee going to do about the open space over here? And so it's just a good chance. It's usually very enjoyable. Brian and Dory are enjoyable people, and they speak very well about these issues. So you will learn even more by scheduling a neighborhood walkthrough. One of the other benefits is something that Nancy touched on, getting to know your neighbor's situation. You know, this is a topic that you don't normally discuss when you get together. It's not something you get together for beer and talk about fire danger. So this is an opportunity for you to get to know who has kids at home, who's working during the day, they need help with their dog or their cat. So there's just a lot of benefits to scheduling this. Next slide, please. So we're asking people to step forward. If you are motivated, if you're interested in spearheading a neighborhood walk, send an email to the Fire and Safety Committee. The email is on the screen, gfsc@geneseefoundation.org. And then we will coordinate schedules with Brian and Dory and get something on the calendar. Right now, their calendars are pretty full. We're scheduling out into March, but you could do it in the summer as well. It doesn't have to be right away. The weather's a lot nicer in June or July, so if you want to wait that long, you can. But it's just a good time to get together and see what you can do. The picture on this slide is a tree in the neighborhood that, you know, needs some attention. And I don't know about you, but it's kind of fun to go out there and clean that up and take care of, and it only takes about 10 minutes, and there you've just saved that tree maybe from the fire going up and starting a crown fire. So anyway, also as a neighborhood captain, you would be responsible for getting in touch with your neighbors, and we can help you do that if you don't have everyone's contact information, but just coordinating the walk with your neighbors. And then we might do some follow-up afterwards, you know, to see if you guys need help, if you need more ideas of what else you can do. And So send an email, send it tonight. Let's get something scheduled. Lastly, I put Dory's contact information on here again, just because she is the one who does the specific tailored to your house assessments. The neighborhood walk is just going to be a little more general. It's going to cover everybody's circumstances, but make sure you sign up with Dory as well to get your house assessed and get that home hardening ideas from her. Next slide. So these are some websites, some resources. Dory, I think you're going to put a link in the chat that will take you to all of these websites, or it's a document that has all these links, live links in it. So just more resources for you. I think at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Dory, or maybe Chris has questions. If you have, I don't know if this was mentioned, if you have questions, type them in the chat, and we're going to go into the question period right now. So
Actually, Becky, we're going to take a poll. All right. So yes, we are going to answer your questions, and I will put that link into the chat box here in just a few minutes. All right. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is I'm going to launch a Zoom poll. And it is literally, I think, 8 questions, 2 of which you get to type an answer in. Very simple. It'll take you less than 5 minutes. So please do that for us to let us know what you think. All right, I have launched it. You are anonymous. It will let me know when the poll is completed. So I'll keep bothering you until you complete it. If you look on the screen, it is there. And you scroll on the side of it. There's a little button to scroll to the next question. And if anybody has any questions about it, please feel free to come off mute and just ask me.
I'm sorry, Dory, I don't see it. I just see the bubble with the pole cartoon in the middle. I don't see anything to the right.
Okay, let me see. Does that help if I stop sharing my screen?
If you stop sharing, I just see everybody like Hollywood squares. I don't see any questions.
Huh? Does anyone else see the poll? Because it's worked every time.
I've seen the same thing. I've seen nothing, just like
Huh.
said, nothing.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder why it's not working.
Possibly clicking at the bottom, there is a poll button.
Right. I did click that and I've launched the poll.
Oh.
It just came up on my screen.
Okay. So see if it'll come up on yours. Anybody else, did it come up on your screen?
No.
Huh. Well, how about I'm going to end it and then I'll launch it again? What do you think? We haven't had this trouble before.
Participants can press that poll button at the bottom too.
Oh,
And that
okay.
should pop
Thanks,
up.
Brian.
Where-
Where is the poll button at the bottom?
So
Exactly.
similarly, where your chat button is and where the participants is,
Right?
it's
Oh, somebody
below
found
the
it.
gallery. It should be down there.
I see participants, chat, share screen.
Huh. Well, I
Record
went,
reactions, stop video.
interesting.
Yeah, there is
And
not
I
a there.
have polls/quizzes on the bottom of mine, but it also popped up for me.
Okay, interesting. Huh.
It's weird.
Well, darn. That's the first time.
Let's see.
Carol mentioned, make sure it didn't pop up behind another window.
Oh, on their screen?
Sometimes it's hiding behind your Zoom window.
Hmm.
So if you're able, maybe move it around a little and see if there's a little black box hiding behind it.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Carol. Did anybody else? How are you guys? Has anyone else found it?
No.
Oh, bummer. Okay, well, we'll go like another 45 seconds and then.
Yeah, I'm not finding it.
Hmm.
I have a lot of open windows and I'm closing them all.
And Jolene, are you on a computer or are you on an iPad? Just out of
I
curiosity.
am on my work laptop And I
okay.
use Zoom probably 20 times a day, and it's
Oh,
no
so
poll.
excited because I
If she
finally.
can't figure it out.
It's probably me, the operator. I just don't see it. I'm sorry. I'm closing all, which I
That's
need to do.
okay.
Yeah.
So, and really it's to help us.
Yeah, it's for us.
Improve this. So if you aren't able to do the poll, just, you can put in the chat, it answered my questions. It was useful, too much time spent on whatever, any feedback you can give us,
Yeah.
we appreciate. We always talk after these and figure out what we can do next time to do it better.
And also, if there's any topic we didn't cover that you did want us to cover, please put that in the chat box as well. And all right, so it's been 4 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And I think 5 people found it. So you 5 people, thanks. Sorry about that. That's so strange. So anyhow, I'm going to end the poll. And I think it tells me I'll save. Okay. Oop.
Dory,
Yes.
this is Gene Milstein. I
Hi.
found the poll, but, and I answered the question, but when I hit the submit button, nothing happened.
Okay, don't worry about it. This is a bug. I'll figure it out. Thank you for trying to do it, Gene. I really appreciate it. Okay.
Is it
I ended
projecting?
the poll, so don't worry about it. But I do want everyone to know that right now, I put the link in the chat box for you that has the document with all the links on it. So just make sure you get to that link. It has a lot of resources, including all of our emails. Okay. And I'll put it in there again before we're finished. So now, Chris, back to you.
I'm Chris Garlasco. I'm another member of our illustrious Fire and Safety Committee. And I am monitoring all the questions coming in, but I also have been monitoring questions from previous plan unit presentations. So I think I'm going to pull a little from some of those questions because they'll really get the juices flowing and get you thinking about what some other of our neighbors have asked about. And one of the big things is which houses get protected by our firefighters. So Dory, you usually take this one to talk about more about how the firefighters kind of approach these emergency areas.
Sure. Just like in the presentation, I mean, it has to be safe for us, right? I mean, if there's not a safe area around your home and there are lots of flames, we're not going to be anywhere that it's safe. So that's why your defensible space is so important. We can't personally fight a fire with flames that are over 4 feet in length. And so I'm pretty sure that anyone in charge of me to go and fight fire is not going to put me anywhere that is unsafe. So again, thinking about the vegetation around your home, the flammable things around your home, that's why we are doing this evening. So if I can be more specific, please feel free to ask.
And a big question that comes up, I've got a fire hydrant in front of my house. So does that mean I'm safer?
Not necessarily. If you have a structure fire at your house, yeah. If it's a wildland fire, we generally do not hook our engines to the fire hydrants. We need to be mobile. We need to move around. We have big tenders that hold water that come and fill our apparatus up, or we go to them. They're generally in an area that's safe where they can sit for a while and get that water because, fire is dynamic and we can't be in any one place for too long. We want to be able to get out of the way of danger if we need to in a hurry. So yes, it's nice to have those hydrants, but please don't think that we will hook up to a hydrant in front of your house during a wildfire.
And what about a place that's safe to stay in place? That's a big question we get often.
Yeah, there are no identified places like that in Genesee. We do not have an area big enough for you to go and shelter in place in Genesee. There are none identified from the CWPP. So please evacuate early when you get that notice. If you see smoke or fire, you should leave.
And
Can I just
Brian-
add, you don't need to get an evacuation notice to evacuate.
Correct.
Use your common sense. It's better to evacuate unnecessarily than to not be able to evacuate when you need to.
And Brian, a lot of questions about trees, like, again, maybe reiterate, who's responsible for tree removals?
Sure. So if you're doing a defensible space on your property, obviously you're responsible for it. One example lately is we had that big windstorm and we had some trees fall down over roads, over private drives, over driveways, and then in people's backyards. And so me and my assistant open space manager, we've been doing a lot of that lately. And if there's a open space tree that like there's actually a bunch that were falling onto people's backyards, I came and removed it. Or were leaning in other trees in your yard, I came and removed it, or fell over your driveway or your private drive, we came and removed it. So that's kind of a different example. Is that what you're getting at, Chris?
Yes, yes. And also questions about, are certain trees safer than others to have? And if we're taking some of these trees down, maybe we should replace them with safer trees.
Yeah, I always recommend folks deciduous trees like cottonwoods and aspen. I think everyone's probably pretty familiar with aspen out here. They're tough to get started, as in if you plant it, but if it does get going, they usually do pretty well and they propagate on their own. And then cottonwoods, we don't have a lot of cottonwoods just because we don't have the appropriate moisture up here, but there are some, and there's some in drainages and there's some in folks' front yards. The one thing I would caution folks about cottonwoods is that they tend to break in windstorms and snowstorms, and I'm sure folks know that as well. But they hold so much moisture that they are less likely to burn, but they do burn. Last year in February, there was that fire down in Morrison at Bear Creek Lake Park, and the primary thing that was carrying the fire, amazingly, was grass, cattails, Russian olive, and cottonwoods.
We've got a question from Jolene about, she's got a neighbor that's doing some remodeling and dumped some of the wood out onto her property, or, it's on their private drive, I guess, until everything's cleaned up. What's a good way to try to get that taken care of so they're not all at risk?
Yeah, if we're talking about dimensional lumber, that kind of thing, I mean, that's trash. Of course, it'll burn. That's something that, I mean, maybe your neighbor's on this call, maybe that's why he said it, but it is okay to.
It's
reach out
not
to-
a neighbor. We think someone's coming into Genesee, and I appreciate that, but just to quickly interject, we think somebody sees the land between the Grable's house and ours. And Brian and I talked to you about this. We had a whole bathroom completely dumped, an old bathroom onto our land. The toilet, the sink, everything. Now what we're getting is we're getting a lot of lumber, old wood and cut wood. Yeah, because no one thinks this is anybody's land. Because
And this
it's
is
this
your
huge-
property they're dumping
It's our
on?
property and the Grable's in between.
Yeah.
And there's that ravine right down the middle. So I think people think it's open space and it's our land and it's theirs. And, we go out there. I mean, we've actually hired people to come and help us get all this, the remodeling stuff out. We've done that twice. And that's been in the last 8 months. So I don't know who is modeling in the nearby neighborhood. I don't think it's Genesee people. This
No,
is somebody who just sees it as an open space and I'm driving in off the highway. I'm going to go in far enough where I can just dump it. What I'm concerned about is we have tons of dead wood and a lot of, it's a lot of stuff that's being dumped now. I have fresh cut wood. I went out looking for things that were left from the big winds. someone has dumped a bunch of fresh cut branches on our land. And I'm like, here we go again. Who is this? It's crazy. And I'm hiring young teenagers and adults, and we are spending a lot to clean up this area because we have a lot of leftover wood and dead wood
I
on this
think
land.
starting with security is the best for that particular issue. Like a wildlife cam is something that I recommend to folks. You can find really cheap ones on Amazon or even at Walmart. You don't have to get the super expensive one that goes to your cell phone, but they're motion detected. I use them for wildlife, but you could use them for somebody that's dumping trash on your property. And I would start
We
with
tried.
that.
It's so far away from where our house is. So
Okay.
I don't know.
And-
I'll figure it
Well,
out later.
The last thing I'd say, Jolene, is, I mean,
Yeah.
you can call me and Susie tomorrow, but definitely you've probably done this, notifying the sheriff that we hire, the deputies that come out.
Yeah,
And
we've got
that's
the great guy that he came out and he
Did he?
looked, and yeah, we've got a lot. It's not just a little bit, it's a major dumping ground. And I think
Okay.
they just see it as big land and it's easy to just dump. So it's
Yeah.
an odd piece of land if anybody's seen this. And
Well,
it
maybe
seems
we'll,
like an
you
open
know,
area.
maybe some of the neighbors will help you keep on the lookout. We've got a question about the egress route. And Nancy, maybe you can talk about our progress on how we're dealing with the evacuation issues identified in the CWPP. You're muted.
Let me just ask Jason if he wants to answer the question. If not, I will.
Good evening. I'd be happy to address it to the best of my ability. This is certainly something that is critical to our community, and it's a top priority for me and the fire district as a whole. And I could go into all sorts of different reasons why. I'd be happy to do so. But to answer your question directly, we are hopefully moving this ball forward in terms of working with the foundation. The foundation has taken a great leadership role to move this forward. And really the next step is to be transparent and to communicate with all of you and the community as a whole, and to share with all of you what this is, what it's going to cost, why it's important, and come up with a plan to finance it. So it's moving forward. I expect within this next year, there's going to be a lot more information that will be shared with each and every one of you.
And I'll just add, I think it'll be sooner than within the next year. I think it will be in a couple of months. And that to say that the Genesee Fire and Safety Committee has a working group that is evaluating a variety of possible routes to improve the evacuation situations. Some may be easier, some may be existing roads that just dirt roads that need to be better maintained, arrangements for some gates to be able to be open. Almost all of that still takes us out to I-70. So it certainly doesn't solve all of the problems, but we're looking at what might be done relatively quickly and inexpensively to give some relief. It's complicated. There's private property owners that can influence whether you can do that or not because they own the property. So we also are investigating possible routes out from the south side of Genesee. We feel, and I think the fire department as well feels, we need to have something to the south, because if we can't get out to the north, we're stuck. So, you know, those are likely going to be new roads, more expensive, that we will need to pay for. So it will, all of this information will be made available. I think for our working group, we are shooting for presenting our findings to the board at their March meeting. And then there will be lots and lots of community education, the ability to ask questions, provide input, etc.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks very much, Jason. Question, if I'm not sure who wants to jump in and grab this one, but if we do this home assessment, does the Genesee Foundation automatically accept that?
Okay, so when I come and do an assessment, if there are things that, for instance, if you want to change your 0 to 5, or you want to take out the trees that I've marked and we've discussed, you do have to go through the ARC. You would have to, at this point, you still have to get a defensible space plan, but they are working to change that so that I would be that person as well. So you still have to go through, get your defensible space plan, go through the ARC and do all the things like you normally would. And it's not that painful. We just did a 0 to 5 at my house. It was like a week thing to kind of get all the paperwork, to get the little posting, to go through the necessary meeting and whatnot. So we've taken care of it. We've gotten everything checked off. We did not have any trees removed at this time, but we are, for us at my house, that's our next step. So yes, go through the ARC.
But Becky, sorry, Dory, the important part of that question is that the Fire and Safety Committee worked with the ARC and rewrote the tree removal policy to make it easier to remove trees for the purpose of fire mitigation. If you have a defensible space plan done, and right now it says it has to be done by someone on the Jeffco list of approved consultants, and we're working to change that so that it also says, or the wildfire prepared assessment that Dory did. If you have had that done, and if you want to complete the plan that was given to you, remove all the trees that you were told need to be removed for your defensible space plan, the ARC cannot decline your application. But we ask that when you have scheduled the defensible space consultant, you let the ARC, give the ARC 48 hours notice that it's happening. Then a representative from the ARC may or may not come out and will interact with your fire mitigation specialist and may say, oh, but this tree is beautiful and an old tree, and could it be saved? So they have their input then. And it is up to you and the defensible space consultant what to do about their suggestion about doing things differently. If you don't have the defensible space consultant there, the ARC there when the defensible space consultant is there, the ARC could come out and look and say, oh, but what about this tree? And then you'd have to have the defensible space consultant come back again, and it would cost more money. So just if this is the route you're going, have someone from the ARC be there. The tree policy, and just go to the Genesee Foundation website and under search, write tree removal policy, and it will tell you everything. There are all kinds of different categories, but it'll give you all this information. We also put in language which allows Brian to approve up to 5 trees being removed for fire mitigation purposes without your needing to go to the ARC. So that is also another way of approaching tree removal for fire mitigation.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And I'll just quick put in a word that Dory and Jason have done an incredible job on the website for Genesee Fire, the fire district. And Dory has coordinated with us, and our Fire and Safety Committee has all of these resources, all of these links, all of these on the Genesee website as well. Very easy to get to. And so you don't have to be without this information. You don't have to carry any of the pamphlets around with you. It's very easy to access. And so Some of the links might be on tonight in the chat box. But tomorrow you can just go to Genesee website or Genesee Fire and you can get all this information there as well. Couple of other questions came up and about Christine asked about the cell service. You know, some parts of Genesee have a terrible time and she wants to know, can we get more towers in here so we're not without cell service?
We have bad cell service, but you know, we have Wi-Fi in the house, and for our phones, once we turned on Wi-Fi calling, which means it uses the Wi-Fi service and not the cell phone service, we have had very little problems. There have over the years been attempts to get additional towers, and in the past they've run up to NIMBY complaints, and so it really hasn't gone anywhere.
I think one of the other things to talk about is, you know, if you get code red and you start paying attention to these red flag warning days, some of our services are going to be out in an emergency. Or you should not plan on having to depend on them. That's why Nancy mentioned in an emergency, when you're evacuating, have a plan. People may not be able to call you and reach you, know where you are. You may not be able to call people to tell them where you are. So you have that planned place to meet up. And while you're moving in your car, out in your car, we may not have power. And you cannot underestimate how difficult it is with the smoke to be able to see things. So your lights might be off, it might be smoky, it's going to be hard to see. So another cell phone tower might sound like a good idea, but it's more important for you to be prepared and plan ahead, and don't plan for some of these services to be in place. A couple of other things that have come up in past questions is, you know, what's Jeffco doing to help us with some of these issues up here in the mountain? Nancy, what's some of the latest? You have generously volunteered to join some commissions and been in touch with some work groups, and you're coordinating with Evergreen. Tell us a little bit more about where our county is for us.
Well, the county is hamstrung by not having any money. Everybody got their Tabor refunds, which didn't amount to much, but it was money the voters said, we want back, you can't keep it. So the sheriff's department has fewer people in it. Everybody is stretched. There was a wildfire mitigation task force that Commissioner Kemper led, and we talked a lot. We had some ideas, but I'm not sure any of them will be executed. The emergency manager position was open. It's been filled, but with someone who doesn't have wildfire experience. So there is a lot of concern. It would be lovely. Now, you know, we're talking about our CWPP. The CWPPs for the Evergreen Fire District, Elk Creek, Intercanyon, Foothills, they are all, everybody has problems. Everybody has evacuation problems. It would be wonderful if the county took the lead and mitigated roadside trees on county roads, but they don't have the personnel or the budget to do that. A lot of money, the Colorado State Legislature approved a lot of money to go towards wildfire issues, and the infrastructure bill nationally has a lot of money. It's not clear how much leadership Jeffco is going to give, but the fire districts and our HOA are all looking at these grant opportunities to see how we can get work done and funded. The Rotary Wildfire Ready Group is a squeaky wheel with the county and other entities. And I think we've made them understand that we hope for more from the county.
Thanks, Nancy. We have another question, maybe Brian. Everybody is asking, do we have a list of contractors that are approved or people should call to do some of this home hardening or defense work?
We don't approve anyone or disapprove of anyone. You can hire who you like. For tree removal, I have 2 folks that I do recommend, 2 companies, only because I've actually hired them to work on open space, and I was very happy with how they work. And they've done a lot of work in Genesee in general for tree removal. And I'll say the companies without the link here, but it's Elk Mountain Tree Service and Ace Tree Care. As far as landscaping, I don't have anybody because I haven't hired anybody to do landscaping, so I don't have anyone to recommend. But I know that folks have used different people in Genesee, and Nextdoor is often a good way to get different recommendations for people that they've had success with for landscaping.
And I just want to add, on the wildfireprepared.com website, there are also a list of people that remove trees. They've been vetted by Wildfire Prepared, and they understand how to read the reports and things like that. And as far as landscapers, again, we're trying to gather that information. And what I had done is I had used my landscaper from the past, and I was just very specific with what I wanted. But again, we are trying to get landscapers a list together.
And Brian, a couple of questions about slash pickups. What's on the calendar? What kind of help with Genesee and then Dory with the fire plans, fire district's plans to do some pickups and coordinate?
Yeah, we're gonna do our annual slash pickup and our annual pine needle pickup as well. Those will be different dates, but for the slash, we'll be doing it in early June. And Dory is also going to do one for the fire protection district. Haven't worked out all the details of that yet, but they're probably going to be separated by some time. We need to figure that out, but there will be 2 this year, which is good because we've heard that folks want more, so we're going to do more.
Thanks. I'm seeing a couple of messages coming across. Jolynn, thanks for that note. We've got teenagers that might want work. If you've got some things that small mitigation projects. And I guess with a few minutes remaining, I mean, Jason, it's wonderful that you're taking the time to join us after the Marshall Fire. People were kind of horrified. People never thought that, you know, that could happen. I mean, you've sat through this presentation. Do you want to share some of your thoughts with us tonight?
Sure, I'll do my best. Thank you. I appreciate that, Chris. And thank you to Becky and to Dory and to Nancy and to Brian. What you guys are doing is tremendous. This is such a huge initiative. And if you look back, it was really started from the fire protection district's perspective back in January, 1 year ago. And the work that's been completed by Dory and her efforts have been wonderful. So it all starts with public education, which is why the fire district invested there first, which is great. And that's so critical for what we're all trying to accomplish. And that is to educate, to teach folks what to do well before a fire comes through in terms of sensible space, as well as home hardening. What I saw last week, I fought more structure fires last week than I have in my last 10 years combined. And the number of homes that were lost and the work that was put out was mind-boggling. It truly was a life-changing event for the folks that experienced it, we saw things that we didn't expect to see here in Colorado. That's stuff we're supposed to see out in California, right? Stuff on the news, on CNN, not on your local news. And we came back with a renewed vigor, a renewed focusing on the things that are important. It starts with this education component. We all have to do our part. But what really caught my attention was that weakest link in terms of the chain, and that's the homes that Many homes may have done mitigation work, defensible space, did a tremendous job, but it just takes one that allows that home to ignite, and then it spreads to the next and to the next. And the radiant heat and the convective heat, the direct flames that are produced from these structure fires, it doesn't matter what you do. At that point, once it's going to catch the vegetation in the neighborhood home on fire. So it's really critical we all do our part to stop that, at our own home before it spreads to our neighbors. And one of the questions that Brian touched on, and I hear, and it's unfortunate when I hear it's, what's the point? Why do we do this? It's going to burn. I have insurance. I'm going to walk away. In the past, I kind of turned my nose up at that question and was a little frustrated by it, but it didn't really dawn on me to what that really meant until last week when I was at a house at 2 a.m. and I looked through a wall that was missing and 3/4 of the house was burning. All that was left was a family photograph on the wall or a hutch with dishes that, I'm sure it went back. Those memories and those keepsakes are irreplaceable. So it's important we protect our story, if you will. Walking to a first floor, the house looked fine. I looked up, the entire roof was gone. It burned off. Things that are important to us that we take for granted day to day, those people's lives were disrupted. And I'm sure if they could go back, they would choose to do this work to help protect their homes, to mitigate that weakest link, to protect their neighbors. So it does matter what we're all doing. And it starts with this forum to educate ourselves, to get out, to be a captain. As Becky said, I think that's wonderful. And to promote what we're trying to accomplish within our plan units. And we could all make a tremendous difference. We have a situation here that's even, how should I say it, more precarious, if you will, in terms of our evacuation situation. One thing that was really, again, eye-opening is these residential streets were, 20 to 30 feet wide. And then they had 5-foot sidewalks in addition to it on either side. So we're talking 30 to 40 feet in a small neighborhood. Brian showed you some pictures that were 14 feet wide with no shoulder, let alone a sidewalk. So what we are facing here is really, it's important. And there's a lot of scary information that I'm sure many of you are hearing. But the good news is what we're accomplishing now and working through this stuff, it is there hope. There absolutely is hope. And what we can all do as a group and unite will make a difference when the time comes. And so it's just so critical we all do our part. We protect our home. Defensible space, by definition, is providing a space where we can defend it for you. Give us that opportunity. Harden your homes, protect it against the embers. Have that plan for evacuation. Educate yourself. Work with Dory and the team here. So the resources really have ramped up over this last year. Tie into them, and I truly believe in my heart of hearts that you guys can make a difference and we can save our community. I live here too, and I want to come back here at night and enjoy just as much as each of you do. So if you guys have any questions for me or operationally, I'll be happy to address those. But otherwise, I really appreciate you guys coming.
Right. Thanks, Chief Puffett. So we are at 7:32, and I would like to honor everyone's time. Thank you so much for attending this plan unit. Please reach out. I did put the link into the chat box. That link I put in there is a way for you to reach all of us. I will do it again. If you're interested in a home assessment, again, please reach out, email me, go to the website. Thank you so much for your time and have a good evening. And we need some captains to step forward. All right. It's a lot of fun. Thanks so much. Hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much, all of you. You're amazing. Thank you for doing this.
Let's get some neighborhood walks going. It's the best part of this